Here we are on episode 113 of the Trash Talk Business Podcast. I'm Andy Weins, and today, this is our first episode post Casey. For some of you guys that have been watching the show for a while, Casey Bubba Lawrence has been my longtime co-host. He was a visionary behind the podcast initially, and so this is the first episode without him. So wish him the very best in his endeavors. He's getting into the real estate world, and we still talk and text regularly. So excited for him and his new endeavors. And so now this is Jackie and I doing our thing. She's our guest today. Her name is Jackie Gonzalez, and we're going to talk about what she wants to talk about. So, Jackie, why are you on the Trash Talk Business Podcast? We'll start there. Start with the softball.
That is a very good question. I love the name Trash Talk, by the way. So I'm CEO of PATLive, and we provide virtual receptionist services to companies across the United States. And over the last 6 months or so, we've been getting more heavily involved in home services vertical. And I know junk removal and whatnot is kind of construction and home services, commercial and residential, so to speak. But we've really been, just trying to get to know the players in this field and learn as much as we can about what's working, what's not working. And we came across you and your profile through Jobber because our company recently did an integration with them. And we just liked your podcast. I thought it'd be great to have an hour conversation on a Monday afternoon, getting to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And one of the challenges we have, right, in our business is, especially when we're scaling, is, okay, one in the hand, two in the bush. Right when we're first starting, you're sitting there waiting for the phone to ring, and then the phone rings, and you book the job, and you're like, well, that's awesome. Yeah. And then you go to the job, and then the phone rings, and you're knee deep into a sofa sleeper, and you're like, what do I do now? Right? Exactly. Do I put down the sofa sleeper and pick up the phone, or do I let it go to voicemail? I can remember my second month in business. I went to a networking event because that's what we're supposed to do, right? Now, so I'm at a networking event. We had it was my brother and I, and then we had one employee at the time, and they were banging a job at the time. And my phone rang, and I'm sitting there at a networking event, and I was like, hello? We can probably pick that up for you. Can you just text me your address when you get a chance? So you know what I mean? And then I remember like the third phone call, I just finally walked out of the networking event, or walked out in the hallway, took the call, stuck my head back in. I've been gone for like 15 minutes, and my phone rang again. I'm like, screw it. I just went back to the office. I'm like, well, right.
That's a great problem.
It's a great problem to have. Yeah. Where it's like, I got it's like a 7:30 breakfast networking, and my phone rang like 4 times. I was like, well, this is awesome and terrifying at the same time.
Shep Hyken, I don't know if you know who he is. He's like a customer service thought leader. He paired up with Ring Central to do a study, and they found that during the work week, up to 20% of calls to home service companies go unanswered. And on the weekends, Friday evenings, Saturdays, and Sundays, it's like 41% of calls go unanswered.
Those are rookie numbers, first of all. I wanted to get concrete done, right? And this isn't, so like concrete is like now into construction, so it's not quite home services. I wanted to get a concrete pad poured, and I needed numbers, right? I wanted, hey, is this going to cost me $50,000, $100,000? Yeah. I made 15 phone calls in a week. 15. I talked to 2 real people. Yeah. Both of them pushed me off to somebody else. Like, oh yeah, our project manager will call you in the next couple of days. 15 led to 3 total estimates, and it took like 3 weeks for the first estimate to even get in my hand to have a starting point. And most of them went to voicemail. And then my dad has put in doors and windows, mostly doors now, for the last 30 years he's been doing it. 15 basically on his own. And when his phone rings, he's either putting a door in, and he'll walk out to his truck, take chicken scratch nose, be like, all right, I'll call you later, right? And like for him, it works. That's the expectation that is set. And then with our company, when we look at our reviews, we have over 1,100 reviews. Perfect 5-star rating, and we consistently see communication from the word go until the end of project was phenomenal. So it's like, what I understand that my dad has gotten away with it for 30 years, right? And for the last 15 years, where he's been basically solely responsible to pick up the phone, like he's gotten away with it. Yeah. And so now I want to do better. Right.
Exactly.
And yet and now I'm at a point where we've had a full-time operations person for the last 7 years. So, And we still miss calls because we have calls, right? Because we can only be
somebody
on one
goes
call
to the
at a time.
bathroom. You're on
Exactly.
vacation.
Nights and weekends, all that shit. Like, it's always a problem.
I think part of this, Andy, is that people's expectations have just been beaten down over the last 10 years, 20 years for customer service. I really firmly believe this. Like, I think that some companies get away with not answering their calls or not returning phone calls or not returning their emails or whatever because the general public sentiment is that they're going to get crappy service now. And it starts kind of at the top, right? Big companies offshored our customer service decades ago because it was cheaper to go to, some overseas country and get it at a cutthroat rate. And they started lowering our expectations for what good customer service is at this global level, right? And it's trickled down now to even the small businesses, home service providers, for example. And I think every person I know has a very similar story to you. Like personally, I just tried to get landscaping company. I have 3 rental properties. So I wanted to get a lawn care company for those 3 rental properties to just come out, give me a quote, and then manage these 3 properties on a contract. I don't change companies, right? Because once you get a lawn care company, if they're delivering, you set it and forget it. I mean, one phone call has landed a lawn care company, 3 houses, twice a month visits, because I'm in Florida and it grows year round here. And it's been a several year contract for them. And it took me, I don't know, a dozen phone calls just like you. And the first company who answered the phone got my business.
It is that simple.
It's that simple, right? And so this is why we're here. This is why PATLive is here, is to help with that.
Exactly. And also it's a person that can solve the problem because when I call, whether it's 800 number or anybody else, and they're like, cool, let me take a message and get back to you. It's like, well, hold on. No. I want something to happen at the end of this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, we have you slotted for this time and this date to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
There, Jordan, and here. Like, this is as simple as answer the phone. That seems, there you go. Like, answer the damn phone. I don't know if he's chiming in from earlier, like when you're at a networking event or on the business end of the couch, what do you do, right? Like, that's the challenge, right? You want to answer the phone and you also want to take care of your customer that you're with. Here's what the other thing is, what's interesting. So you've said that for years, people have gone away with it and our expectations have dropped. Here's the flip side. In other sectors of the world, especially in products, the expectations have gone through the roof. Now, when I go to Amazon to buy something, in my head, I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to have it like I need it within a week. Right? Like I ordered flip-flops the other day, Javiana flip-flops. Like I have 2 outfits. It is work and beach. Those are like, I watch. I'm
wearing my Javiana flip-flops right now. I'm not going to lie.
100%. Right. I have a warehouse, so it does not play well. Like I watched the Barbie movie. I went to the Barbie movie with my daughter, and the Barbie's like, I'm Beach Ken. Like that's who I am. Like that's me. I'm Beach Andy. Like when I leave here, I'm gonna go play volleyball, and I'm Beach Andy. Anyways, Javiana's handles, they're just like whatever it was. It was buy $50 worth and get 20% off mine. And then it was like, do you want next day shipping or standard shipping? And standard shipping was 2 to 3 days. And I was like, you're telling me I can buy flip-flops that and honestly, I need the flip-flops in August because I'm like, I have I blew one. I have like 3 pairs. I broke a pair of sandals. I'm doing this hike, a 7-mile hike in flip-flops in August. And I was like, I want a newer pair so they don't break. It's a veteran hike. Last year I was worried here. We're already fucking way off course. So last year I do this veteran hike, a huge fan, a huge sponsor of it. It's IW Hike. It's the Irreverent Warriors, where we use humor and camaraderie to bring awareness to veteran suicide. That is the ripped down version of the mission statement. Anyways, it's one of my favorite days of the year. Veterans only. It's about a 7-mile hike throughout Milwaukee. We make several stops. We do a couple team building activities. It's awesome. And I've done it for the last couple of years here in Milwaukee. Last year, I showed up to the hike in flip-flops because I was in beach mode, right? And then I had a pair of tennis shoes in my Jeep. And as I'm like hanging out and catching up with people, they're like, are you doing the hike in your flip-flops? And I was like, no, that'd be stupid. That'd be crazy. Why would someone do that? And by about like the 5th person that asked me, I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm doing the hike in my flip-flops. And I always volunteer to be a road guard. So we're hiking. There's like 150 of us. So every intersection, someone has to run up and like put their hand out like, hey, don't hit the car, right? And so I ran the majority of the 7 miles, either barefoot or in flip-flops in like downtown Milwaukee where there's like broken beer bottles and cigarette butts everywhere. And so anyways,
now that's going to be part of your brand, Andy.
I'm on brand. Like right now this year, if I show up wearing shoes like everybody else, they're like, this fucking guy fucking.
They're going to remember you for they might not know your name, but they're going to be like, oh, it's flip-flop.
Exactly. The
from
flip-flop
last
guy.
year.
That
Branding
big
is
goofy guy
important.
that just runs a lot in flip-flops or bare feet and probably needs a tetanus shot. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, so that prompted my Javiana story, which got a sidetrack. Anyhow, in products, you can buy a product Amazon and they're same day or tomorrow. It's like, I guess tomorrow's convenient. Like I order shit a week or two before I need it, thinking that we're still living in this archaic, 2007 time period. I don't know.
I think our demand for instant gratification is getting higher for sure. And it's not that people don't want great service. People are craving it. They really are. And they're rebelling against some of the automations and these self-service IVRs that drive them down 80 menu prompts or whatever. But I don't think people, IVRs like, interactive way, like press 1 for sales, press 2 for service.
There's a rule. Down. There's a rule in the military, right? It works in the civilian world. Whenever you use jargon or acronyms, right, you have to explain it. So IVR, say that again.
IVR, it stands for interactive voice response, but it's also known as an auto attendant. It's any menu when you call someplace and it says press 1 for this, press 2.
I'm so glad in 40 years I've never known what that is because it's bullshit and I hate it.
Right? Now you know what your enemy is.
Oh my God, I hang up. I'm like, this is bullshit.
No. You know what the worst ones are? The worst ones are when you call, it asks you to put in your 16-digit card number, your 3-digit, 4-digit social, your zip code, and then you get transferred to an agent who is overseas somewhere, and she asks you everything all over again. Why are you doing this?
They're putting in pain points. Here's the deal. It works though, because there are times where I'm like, this isn't worth my time right now.
Yeah.
And then I will hang up. I'm so mad. I exit.
Yeah.
Actually, shout out Keurig. Keurig has an 800 number, clearly overseas. Guy sounded Indian, so Mumbai, whatever, Delhi. He's from somewhere.
Yeah.
Solved the problem in 30 seconds. I clicked the wrong button on my Keurig auto delivery, and I had this meltdown moment. It was on a Saturday night because, of course, that's as an entrepreneur when I'm like, I should renew my fucking Keurig.
That's exactly the right time.
Because I'm reading emails that were not that important to read. And I had an auto renewal, and I was like, I need to pause the auto renewal. I canceled the auto renewal, and they're going to bill me for the price of my machine, all this shit. And I was dreading making this phone call. I make the phone call. The guy picks up. He's like, oh, yeah, Mr. Weins. Yep, you shouldn't have clicked that button. I was like, I know. I know what I did. He goes, nope, you're all set. I get the automatic email. I looked. It was 4 minutes and 34 seconds from the time of the phone call till resolved, and I did the stupid survey afterwards. I was so excited. I was like, 10 out of 10, that guy.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your expectations were so low. You were already dreading picking up a phone call because that is not the common experience anymore. And this is where and why I'm so passionate about having real friendly people answer your calls, because in a competitive landscape, if you're in an industry or a city where there's 20 HVAC companies and you're an HVAC company, right? People dread having to pick up the phone and call a company nowadays because they just feel like it's going to be this monumental task. And if your customers, they dial a phone number, somebody friendly answers the phone within 20 seconds, they are able to book you an appointment or get you a quote or transfer you to the right person if it's an emergency kind of situation. If they're able to get that done, that customer is already thinking that your business is top notch and is going to come back time and time again for your service.
I love the fact you use the number 20 seconds. So I heard years ago, I was teaching at an MBA program, and now the name of the school is not in my brain. It was in Dayton, Ohio. It was not the University of Dayton. It was a school nearby. I drove by Dave Chappelle's house randomly because he lives out there in Lemon something or another, outside of Dayton, Ohio. Yeah, you can see the gate and then a bunch of trees and then not Dave. Anyways, random side door. Anyways, we were doing a project with Grunt Style. It's a t-shirt brand originally out of Chicago, and now I think they're in Texas somewhere. Anyhow, Grunt Style, their rule was 20 and 20. So their rule was answer every phone within 20 seconds, answer every email within 20 minutes. And all their customer service people, that was their number one metric. Because when you answered, when you responded, whether phone or email, that set the tone. Right?
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh, wow, I feel heard. Like you said, they want to know that something's happening at the, you picked up, right? Yay, gold star for doing the minimum, right? And then something's happening, right? Oh, hey, send the pictures to this. Got it. Oh, this person's going to call me before 5 a.m. or before 5 p.m. today. Good. Oh, a service technician is going to be out my house in 2 days from now. Sounds good. Something is happening versus ambiguity, like, oh, we might get back to you, or someone might get back to you, or you might get back to us. Like, we have to have an. Well, you and I talked last week, a couple weeks ago, when I first heard about your company, and even picking up the opportunity to answer my phones here soon, is there has been an actionable item. Somebody has to know that there's something to do. Maybe the customer needs to provide pictures. Okay, hey customer, we can give you a quote over email or over the phone or via text when you send us pictures. Got it. Someone has all right, I'll go to stop by the property tonight and take some pictures. Good. Now we're all on the same page that something's going to happen. And then we can look at our notes and tomorrow morning be like, oh, they didn't send the pictures. Hey, did you get a chance to take the pictures? Oh, yeah, I forgot to send it to you. Or, oh, no, I sent them. They end up in the spam folder. Something. Because now we have an agreed upon thing versus, oh, we'll get back to you. Someone will follow up. Like, how randomly arbitrary is that?
Yeah.
Right? Some expectation.
A lot of what you're talking about, we do all kinds of different things for a lot of different customers. Some customers don't want us to book things directly on a calendar because they're very controlling or because they have very nuanced complexities, right, that they need to navigate. And some customers are like, here's the calendar, here's the rules, here's the parameters, use it. What I will say is, and this is especially true in this industry where they need a quote and they need a service appointment, right? Whether you're an HVAC or junk collector or a window replacer, that's pretty much what you're doing is you're going to get a quote and you're going to do an appointment to get them out there. Is having a service like PATLive helps business owners systematize things. So this is one thing when you were talking earlier about you start your business and you get a phone call and you're really excited and then you're on the couch and another call comes in, right? A lot of times growth in companies, it doesn't come like this steady, path, right? It can kind of come in spurts. And you're kind of doing this. And what happens to a lot of businesses is they're managing everything really well. And then they get to this point of inflection and they're like, I can't do anything. And it forces them to slow down a little bit and say, all right, how can I delegate? How can I systematize, for lack of a better word? How can I put a process in place? And then they kind of coast along and then things start escalating up a little bit. And then they say, now we're at another inflection point. Do we hire more people? Do we add, more resources? That kind of growth is pretty common. And I think what we see a lot of times is the newer companies don't quite have the systems down yet. They don't have the tools like a Jobber or a calendaring system because it's just a guy and he's like penciling you in and saying, I'm going to come out there Tuesday afternoon, right? And he doesn't know quite how to translate that to a third-party company like us. But one of the things that I think we help customers do is say, all right, you don't have a system like that. This is how we can help you baby step to that. So maybe you don't have a sophisticated calendar that has all these great nuances and complexities built in. But what you can say is, whatever day of the week it is, tell them they're on the schedule for 2 days out. And then we'll call them with a time, right? Even something like that, even being able to tell your caller, hey, listen, it's Tuesday. I've got you down on the schedule for Thursday. Bob from the office is going to give you a call tonight or tomorrow to give you your exact time frame. It's not perfect, right? Ideally, you would give them the exact time frame and you'd have them meet there, but it helps that business owner start to systematize and get to that more sophisticated calendaring system. And if we can help kind of baby step that and help smooth those inflection points in the business, then I'm ecstatic. I think that's what we're here to do and what I like to do. So.
Well, the thing is that so I'm an operations guy. So everything you're saying to me sounds amazing. And yet I know a lot of small business owners. I give you the example of my dad. They're non-operational people. My dad is phenomenal at putting indoors. He is great at selling the service. He is great with the customers. Right. Yeah. Some of the things he's not great with, right? Like I look at the 6 buckets of business. I am great in operations and numbers. Those are my two. I love those buckets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Those buckets ain't on his fucking list, right?
Yeah.
Now he can go put a door in and talk to a customer for 4 hours and get them to open up to him. Yeah. I put the door in and I'm like, just hang, let's get this thing hung. Right. I know it's gonna take 4 hours. I got 3 friends. I'm not looking for any more. Right, my dad has hundreds of friends, if not thousands, throughout Milwaukee of doors. Right, he's that standard contractor where when you ever drive around with my dad in a truck, he's like, "Yeah, put a door in that house." The red door. He'd be like, "Right hinge in swing." I had to grind down the sill. Right, I asked him my daughter, right, his granddaughter. If I asked him right now her birthday, it would take him a minute. If you asked him what the swing was on a door from last week, he'll tell you, oh, yeah, right hinge in swing, screen door swung out the opposite direction. because there was a thing and then the stuff and it was okay. Like, exactly. Like, he's a standard contractor.
I relate to, my dad owned a business my whole life. I grew up in his small business in Miami, Florida. He sold and repaired generators. And so he did it for businesses, for buildings, for hospitals, for boats, for RVs, any application you could put a generator. And I know exactly what you're talking about, riding around in his sweaty truck with that like plastic vinyl seat that like made your like sweat underneath because there was no AC. And every time we pass the building, he'd be like, they got a 30 kW in there. They really should get a 40 kW, but you know, they wouldn't for the extra money. And I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's fascinating. So I know everyone has their gifts, right? Like some people are great at the customer, they're great at the business, they're great at the trade. And if you're not great at all of it, then you got to find help for the portions that you're a deficit, you know?
Here's the deal. When I look at the 6 buckets of business, they're consistent with EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. The EOS has 3 buckets. I've taken the 3 buckets and I broke it to 6. It's the same 3 basics and I split them in half basically. The fact of the matter is nobody's great at all 6 because then you're not good at any of them. Right. Yeah. And when I talk to this class, the 6 buckets of business, when I ask people how motivated, right? And we look at it from a skill and a will perspective, right? It is very obvious to me and to the other person what they hate doing, right? Like marketing is not a top 3 thing for me. Like this logo, I paid someone to do this logo. Right. Our Facebook posts, I don't do the Facebook post. Our marketing material, I tell people what I think I like, and then they show me something. I tell them what I don't like about it, and then they fix it. Or they tell me why I'm wrong. And I say, sounds good. Right? Like that's it. And then we move on, right? Like if I want to argue with them about SEO and they explain to me why I'm wrong, I'm like, sounds good. There goes my argument. And I move on with my life. And so a lot of people that get into business, operations is not their thing. It's not exciting for entrepreneurs. It's not sexy. It's what you have to do versus get to do. Right. Yeah. And we can talk about that from a mindset shift. And I wrote a book about that. And the fact of the matter is, right, when you bring somebody that's really good at operations and shows you how well you can streamline your operations, you will get fucking excited because you no longer have to spend so much time doing something you're not great at and that you don't love doing, right? My goal in life is to spend as much of my time in this world doing something I love doing that I'm also great at. And for you, I love what your service is because you can bridge the gap from, okay, you're here, you want to get here, and you're not here yet. In order to hire, also, when you want to hire someone in operations and your operations are shit, you're gonna be like, hey, do what I do, and I can't really explain to you how to bid a job. Well, I've heard that too. People are like, oh, you hire operations people, they don't know the hell they're doing. It's like, well, did you train them?
No, right? And a lot of people think that you should just know it intuitively, and it is not. We hire 1% of the people who apply for our jobs because there is a skill that is you cannot train. Like people who are great at customer-facing positions, it's an innate part of them, right? I cannot teach you how to be friendly and upbeat on the 50th phone call of the day. Like you just have to be that type of person who is energized by those kinds of continual conversations. And I think it's funny, a lot of people are very comfortable with the notion of outsourcing, but for very specific tasks. It's like they know they're comfortable outsourcing their accounting because I don't know anything about accounting. So I'm going to let this guy do my taxes and this guy or woman do my books, right? A lot of people are comfortable with marketing because they don't know how to draw a logo or how to place a Google ad. And so they get this notion that like those are okay things to outsource to third parties. This role, this customer service, I think is a little bit more challenging for people to outsource for a couple of reasons. One, though, is that they think they can do it. They think it's within their skill set and they can do that while they're also managing a business, running the marketing, doing the trade, performing the invoicing, whatever the other back-end tasks are. So there's this notion that like, yes, I can do that. It is within my skill set and they're hard to relinquish that. And then I also think of all the kinds of things that we outsource. This is probably the hardest for people to outsource from a trust perspective because it is one of the few outsourcing roles where we're directly talking to your customers. And so we're the voice of your business, for lack of a better term. And you have to really trust that the company you have hired to do that is going to represent your brand the way you want your brand represented.
So with your outsourcing, is everybody domestic here in the States or do you outsource? Okay.
No, we're all here in the United States.
Yeah, well, because that's a huge issue, right? There is a language barrier. Like here in Milwaukee, for example, we have a lot of Native American names like Wauwatosa, Oconomowoc, Muskego. Every year, whenever the Packers draft new players up in Green Bay, they have them read off names of like places like Ashwaubenon, right? And they butcher it, and it's fun. Exactly, Ashwaubenon and Menasha and Neosha, and there's a Neosha, there's a Neosha, Nina. Right? It's like, to me, I grew up on this shit. You put someone not from, we had a guy from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He's like he could say Wauwatosa. And I'm like, that's like, that's the simplest one.
That's the easiest one.
What are we doing here?
We have Withlacoochee here in Florida.
Oh, there you go. Exactly. Like zero chance. Zero chance. Say it again. Withlacoochee?
Withlacoochee. Withlacoochee.
But
we have a couple too. But it does. It's both the accents, but it's also cultural too, right? Yep. And I know that overseas centers, they have their place. I'm not trying to diss on them, right? And I know, but they try to teach these overseas centers culture. Like, I don't know if you've ever followed this, but it is a big part of training overseas call centers is American culture. Really? And because they're trying to, ingrain in them what we expect from politeness, right? When do we expect a thank you? When do we expect an apology? That's different from other countries when those things are imbued in us. And Americans, we smile all the time to the offense of other countries. Like, if you travel a lot, some countries are like, why do you guys smile so much? It's creepy. So they do a lot of that, like, cultural training and whatnot overseas, but we have never ever subscribed to that. We have always had our receptionists here in the United States, and up until COVID, we were all here in Florida in one building. And some of our competitors, I think, they try to be sneaky and they'll say 100% North American based. I mean, I guess that's great, but really what they're saying is they're outsourced to Latin.
Okay, Central. So then that was one of the issues. I had a company I was working with for a while, and there was such a cultural divide, and I was like, this is like, I'm already getting frustrated and I want this to work.
Right.
If I was a customer with the expectation, because we brand ourselves as locally owned, right? And now all of a sudden, we're locally owned, and yet we have a third party and a third, in a developing nation answering the phone. Like, we might as well be a franchise at that point. So how do you overcome that? So you're domesticated. You're domestic.
Domestic.
Domesticated.
We're domesticated too.
Well, don't put. Most entrepreneurs are not, right? We don't. The whole reason we got into business ownership is because we piss in the corner, right? Don't put baby in the corner.
That's funny.
I'm a fucking outside dog. I know who the fuck I am.
That is funny.
I mean, I can come in at night and shit. For the most part, you let me run wild. Anyways, your people are domestic here in the United States. So you said they're mostly in Florida. So is everybody remote now? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we used to all be in one building here in Florida. We're headquartered out of Tallahassee, Florida, which is in like the northern section of Florida, the panhandle, if you will. But in COVID, like many companies, we kind of had to go remote under duress in a 2 to 3 week period. But we actually found that remote model has worked a lot better for us. It has helped us scale a lot better to getting better quality receptionists as well. Our turnover has dropped. The receptionists are happier working from remote locations. And so we've kept that model. We're in 4 states for our receptionists. So we're in Florida, Georgia, Kansas, and Texas right now. And we kind of expand strategically to different states. The other real advantage too is it's geographically gives us good coverage there. So when we were all in one location in Florida, we are pretty isolated where we were located, but Florida is a hurricane place, obviously, and they're doing nothing but ratcheting up. And so we wanted to get a little more spread out so that if a hurricane were to come through our headquarters, we would still have receptionists who can answer those calls in 20 seconds or less, like we talked about earlier.
So how big is your team now?
We have about 230
it's
employees
huge.
Right now.
That's huge. Okay.
For our space, it's really not that big. It's kind of on the small to mid-size in our space, which is a good. It's a great size from my perspective. So we're large enough that we can have teams and get certifications on the individual teams and still have good 24/7, 365-day coverage. We don't have to worry about our phone calls not being answered because there's only 3 people answering the calls or something. But it's not so big that we don't know everyone's names.
Got it. So one of the issues I've also seen is cost prohibition, right? So how do you, right? Because me, business owner, costs nothing. out of pocket, no hard costs, right? Tons of soft costs or opportunity costs, absolutely. So how do you, I mean, when someone hires you, are you paying someone full time to sit there by the phone? Are you paying per phone call, per minute? Like, how do you get compensated that works
both
yeah. ways?
We got to have volume. So our model is based on volume, right? So we sell to customers and we bill by the minute, and they can buy a package of minutes essentially. So you can start out with a real small package if you're, just starting your business, and then you can scale that up as large as you need it to be, depending on your call volume. But obviously we pay our receptionists hourly. We don't also, this is another differentiator from some of our competitors. Our receptionists are not 1099 distant employees. They're all employees of ours. About 60% of them are full-time, about 40% of them are part-time, and they're all employed by us, whether the phone rings or not. So we're covering that 24/7, 365 spread with our team.
That's fucking interesting. All right. So yeah, I mean, it's not, yeah, if you're only paying for the minutes you use, it's like the old Sprint plan. A lot of you younger people have no idea.
Yeah,
we used to who was that? Was that Singular Wireless? Who had the rollover minutes? Like, that was a big deal. Like,
US Cellular, maybe? I had US Cellular back in the day. I don't know.
I want to say it was Orange. Well, there also used to be like 30 cell phone companies. Now it's down to like 3 because of consolidation. Like Sprint was the big player, and then they got gobbled up. I don't know who Sprint is now. Are they with T-Mobile? Sure.
Probably T-Mobile. T-Mobile, I feel like, is buying everybody up right now.
And also Verizon was the dog shit one for the longest time growing up, I remember. And then I switched to Verizon. And that's what we've had. I mean, unofficial sponsor, and I'm plugging them without them fucking recognizing us. No big deal. We've used Verizon for like 8 years.
It's funny, this like buying things, this is what's happening in our industry too. I'm not gonna lie. So there's so PATLive has been here since 1990, and we started out providing integrated voice networking systems. A little bit complicated, but in the late 90s, we have always had a 24/7 customer service team. And in the late 90s, a lot of our customers, where we were providing service for them, they started asking us, they were like, you guys are so friendly. Can you just answer my calls for me? Because I can't get to them. And so we said, well, yeah, you want us to be your receptionist? We can write a software program for that.
So wait, what were you doing before that?
We were doing these networked telephony voicemail systems. If you think about the days before email, right? If you wanted to send a message to 200 people who were distributed across the United States, what were your options? It was like send a letter, right? Mail it out.
Yeah.
Well, our owner wrote a phone system that allowed people in distributed areas. So like, let's say you worked for a company that had locations all across the United States. They would all become part of a group. And as the CEO, you could record an audio message and have it immediately sent out to everybody in all of their locations, and they would hear that message instantly.
All right, that's funny. I remember, like as you were saying that, when I worked for Black & Decker, so this would have been circa 2004, 2005, we used to get weekly voice messages. I can't remember. It was like 8:30, and it was literally that. It was like, hey, this week on our team, we're doing this. Yeah, and that was also back when we had a conference call that was not Zoom or shit, and you would call into it, and you're like, who's talking? And every time someone chimed in, like, you're like, and then if you talked on one of those calls, like I was a sales rep, and there was probably 120 of us sales reps, and then another bunch of managers, so maybe 150 on our team, and there'd be like a monthly call when everybody was on the call. And if you spoke up on that call, you were despised by everybody, because everyone was like, let's just call. I remember one time I spoke up, because of course rules are merely guidelines given to us by other men that need to be tested.
Aren't you military are rules, right?
Some rules keep you alive and other rules bother me. No, that's it. Oh yeah. No, I had this conversation earlier today about, so in the military, it was always 10 minutes prior to the 10-minute prior, right? So a formation was at 07, right? Because normally you would have PT in the morning, and then first formation is always 07. And then you get to the reserve world, and we don't do PT, right? That's physical training. So formation's at 07. So that means that the platoon sergeant has to have his elements ready by 0650, which means the squad leaders wants everybody out by 0640. Team leaders want everybody else by 0630, right? It's always 10 minutes prior Because if some Joe is in his rack, or some Joe is missing gear, or some Joe is unaccounted for, you bought yourself 10 minutes to find that joker. Anyway, so I remember we'd be up at Fort McCoy, and you'd have the whole platoon in one bay, one barracks. And I was a platoon sergeant, so I got my own individual room. And I'd be walking out of my room in my skivvies, right, walking half alive, crust in my eyes, like half brushing my teeth, walking to the bathroom. And mind you, the bathroom is like 2 sinks and like 4 urinals for 40 dudes, 50 dudes, right? And everybody else is like hauling ass down the stairs. And there I am, not even alive yet, at like 6:33, 6:35 in the morning. And everybody else is hauling ass. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I will be down there by 0650. And without fail, like, yes, to this day, 15 minutes is 5 more minutes than I need to get ready in the morning. You know, like I give myself 20 now because I make myself a cup of coffee, you know, check the old Facebook. You need me out the door in 10 minutes, say less. Let's fucking go. Right? From like alarm going off to in my Jeep moving. So anyways, no, I have always tested the limits of everything to see how, like, let's go until it breaks, right? And at 0650, I'd walk out there, I'd say the words, and then we'd stand there for 10 minutes. I'm like, why are we standing here for 10 fucking minutes? Right? The first sergeant, we know the first sergeant, the commander ain't going to walk out till about 2 minutes to 7, right? So anyways, no, military, when the rules keep you alive, I follow them. And I have a letter of reprimand to prove it.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. That's funny. So you spoke on this conference call, and did you get just beat the hell out of everything?
What happened was, now as I recall it, what happened was, like, the big boss was in my market because the big boss was out of Chicago, and she came up to Milwaukee, and she's like, oh, yeah, Andy, so-and-so, blah, 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 rep from Milwaukee. He had this great story like, great win of the week, and I'm like, oh, fuck. So, of course, I, like, tell the win, you know, and then I get shit on. Like, the next month, everyone's like, oh, nice win. Right? It's like, they told me out by name. Like, what are we doing here?
Interesting days, though, right? Before email, before Zoom, before all that stuff. I mean, you know, it is the foundation for our company. But in the late 90s, when email started taking off, we were like, we have to pivot because that need for the connected.
Even in 2004, 2005, we hardly ever used email. I know, because we never, the thing is, as a sales rep, I was in the field all day. I remember at a PDA, back in the day, a PDA, right?
Yes.
I had one program on it, and basically I could scan. I had a little scanner, so I could scan inventory. Like, that was the extent of and it had an app, like the original app that you could like take pictures on. And I had a phone. I had a BlackBerry. No big deal, BlackBerry. Living the dream over here. And I can't remember. I think we could get emails on our BlackBerry. And yet, I to this day, I probably couldn't tell you how to, like, responding to them was basically like a text message. It was, you were texting back, like, sounds good. Thank you. Like, you weren't writing a fucking email. You weren't copying and pasting. There was no attachments.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
You were 100%. Yeah. It's shifted so fast. I mean, truly, how we interact with each other has shifted so fast just in the last 20 years. But we have, you know, we made that pivot in the late 90s to answering calls on behalf of our customers, and it kind of blew up from there. And we just, you know, kind of went all in and said, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be receptionists for customers across the board. And so when we started out, we didn't start out with this goal of being a answering service, you know, and we just started out saying, we give great service. This is what we're known for. We can expand this and answer the call of our customers that are asking for it. And we've been family owned since that time. In our industry.
What is your role there? What's your title?
I'm the CEO, but I'm not the owners. The owners.
Are you family, or you just grow up in that? How did you get there?
Interesting story. So I went to college at FSU in the late 90s, and I thought I was going to be a great actress, right? I studied theater, and I went to London. Exactly.
Of course, you went to London. Why wouldn't you to London? It's London or New York. What are we doing? You know,
I did this study abroad program with FSU in their theater program. And I was over there and quickly realized not only am I not a good actress, but I also had terrible stage fright. And I was like, well, this is a bad career choice. But
terrible combination, mind you. I didn't even know you. Like I told you, that was terrible advice.
Oh my God. But when I was in London, happened to be the time when our illustrious President Clinton got impeached for his lewd and lascivious behavior with a certain intern.
He never touched
her. Right. So the value of the American dollar fell sharply and the British pound went way through the roof. So the budget I had set for my 4-month study abroad program was eaten up in the first month I was there because the world did not like the unrest in the United States and the impeachment. So I came back from London owing lots and lots of money on a credit card. And I said, I got to get a job. And so I went, looking for a job, and I found PATLive. They were hiring for a customer service receptionist type of position. And I didn't know them from anyone, but I showed up, and this is where I think there was some kismet there. But the woman doing my interview was my neighbor from Miami from many years back. And I'd known her for most of my life. And here she was in another city, in another town, interviewing me. And so took the job. Long story short, kind of progressed up through the company while I was an undergrad, and after undergrad, progressed into some more management positions. But my intent had always been to be a lawyer. So I left PATLive, moved back to Miami, where my now husband was working for his family business. And I went to law school, and I practiced law for several years down in South Florida, and just really hated it.
We're 0 for 2 up at this point in your career.
0 for 2, yeah. My career choices were not great. Honestly, I think PATLive had something to do with it, though, because I really love PATLive. PATLive was one of these rare companies where everybody, drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. We were super energized. A lot of people met their spouses here. I was friends with people that I'm still friends with 20 years later, right? And I got very disillusioned with the practice of law pretty quickly. And so I called up the owners and I said, I'm thinking about moving back to Tallahassee. If there's ever an opening, would you consider me? And he said, when can you be here? I'll make you a job. And they created a position for me. And within 60 days, my husband and my daughter, we moved back to Tallahassee. And that was about 11 or 12 years ago now. And so I came back and worked in a vice president of operations capacity, overseeing customer service, legal, HR, accounting, like these kind of ops positions. And then last year, sort of surprisingly, the CEO, who I didn't think would ever leave, decided that he wanted to step down, and they offered the position to me. And it was a really fast transition where he exited and I came in.
There you go. Congratulations. I always love the origin story, because often as entrepreneurs, we look at people that are successful now and it's like, well, how'd they get there? Right. Yeah. It's like their story is not much different than yours. The difference is you're on chapter 3 and they're on chapter 8. Right. Yeah. So it's like, you got to get the fucking reps in. You got to
pay your dues.
Like exactly. Like actually here, the Dynasty Junk, he threw up a I'll throw that up there. He just said it's on the YouTube, so now everybody can see. He said, hey, Andy, watched your video a few weeks back, and I was very motivated. I say, hey, what got you motivated? He said, seeing your fleet along with how organized your operations were. And I can tell you, my operations were not organized. Mine was purely out of necessity. So let's go back to how organized I was. In June of 2016, for all intents and purposes, that's when we started our business. Like, we're a franchise, we're a real business now. We had the LLC for a while. We've been doing side jobs for years, but like now we're pot committed. And my SOP was, I drove around in my Jeep and my phone would ring and I would write it down. I remember I had these Minuteman press free,
carbon
the peel up, not even carbon copy. They were just not even. And I would write shit down, right? And then I would like text myself, or I would text my brother the info, right? And then I would go back to the office. I'd put it on Outlook. And then, because that was our app, and then I would have to text whoever the crew was, which typically was my brother or our buddy George, like the info. And then when we got the check, I would have to put it in QuickBooks, right? And then I also tell this story when I do jobber content. I actually sat right here for a commercial, and I was like, I like listing these things. And I'm like, what a complete waste of my fucking time. And then they used that take. They blurped out the fucking with a little jobber.
Oh, I was going to say jobber included the F word.
Well, then they just put the logo over my mouth. The beep. Anyways, so like that's where I started, right? So it's like what happened was in December, January, this guy moved in with my brother, and he was going to sell our shit on eBay. His name was Andrew Zell. And all of a sudden in January, like, he started learning about the business, and we were paying him $300 a week, and he could live in the house for free if he could answer the phones, right? And it was like, hey, dude, just answer the phones, like, put estimates on my schedule. Let's drive around and do estimates all day. Like, we're not even having book jobs, nothing. Just, I had this idea, like, I have to see every job at the time, right? Fine. And then that went away quick. And then in February, I got orders for May. I had to be gone for 3 weeks for the Army. Oh. And I remember I had 87 days. I go, you have 87 days to learn everything I know about junk removal that I've learned in the last 8 years, whatever it had been at that point. And he's like, what the fuck? I'm like, I know. we're fucked. Let's go. So he sat next to me in my Jeep for the next 30 days, and we would be driving around, and I would drive, the phone would ring, he would hold it up between us. So I'm driving stick shift, right? He would hold the phone between us. I would talk to the customer while he was on the other phone putting the shit in, because then we got Jobber at this point, and that's how he learned how to do the job. And that was the SOP. And then when we get the next operations person, we're like, well, we can't have them drive around Andy's Jeep for a month. Like, that's not
training.
And mind you, we were driving around banging jobs and doing estimates. It wasn't like we're just driving around because we had shit else to do. And then again, there would be times where we'd be walking and carrying stuff, and he'd be holding the phone, and I would talk and carry something, and he would be typing on one phone and holding the other phone. Like that. Again, like once we actually got it, like once we actually did it in an office, it was like, that was awesome. So where I'm getting with this is Dynasty Junk. His last thing he said was, I'm currently in the beginner stages located at NYC. I wanted to scale off the trucks as soon as I can. Okay. So we've heard how I did things. Jackie, what is the first piece of advice you recommend to him so that he can get off the truck someday and have his operations taken care of? Like, what is, when customers come to you like that, like, hey, I'm on the trucks, I answer the phone, it's owner-centric, I am the business, what's my first starting place?
Yeah, for someone like that who doesn't have an in-office, receptionist or an office manager or something like that, what we're going to look to be is your 24/7 phone support system. And we're going to we have a special team, they're our onboarding team. They're going to spend 45 minutes to an hour with you, and they're going to learn about your business. They're going to learn about what your goals are on every call. Is it to book an appointment? Is it to give a quote? Is it to capture a lead? What is that goal that you want us to do on the call? They're going to learn your systems. So if you're using even a Google Calendar online, we can integrate with that, right? But if you're using something more sophisticated like Jobber, then we'll learn that as well. And we'll use that tool with your calls also. And I think the goal for you is to get that pressure of having to always be on call off of your plate. That's going to give you longer periods of concentrated time where you can both do your job for your customers, but also work on your business, right? I mean, that's what business owners or CEOs need, is reflective time to sit back and say, all right, you know what? Driving around in a Jeep, that worked for a little bit, but we're not doing that the next go round. What are we going to do to make it better the next go round? And being able to kind of pick yourself out of those weeds is crucial.
So what can he do right now? So when he has that 45-minute to hour call, it's not a 2-hour call, 3-hour call, right? What does he need to do? Like, document his processes?
Right. So he needs to figure out exactly how he would have somebody answering the phones book that appointment for you. Dynasty Junk. If that's what you want us to do, is book the appointments, then you got to step back and you got to think, do I have a system for them to do that in? Is it a Google Calendar? Is it a Jobber? And do I have something that is scalable and intuitive? One thing that is really important for us is that we do have a large team, right? And so setting those expectations are proper. Our receptionists are not going to know lots of really detailed intrinsic knowledge about your business. It's just not practical for them to be there. So what we have to look at are systems that make it easy for them to quickly and friendly and professionally book somebody in your process on a call. If you have this really complicated calculus on how you book people for appointments, it behooves you to step back and say, how can I make this simpler and more straightforward so it can be more efficient, and the receptionist can just crank it out on the call? I mean, I think, Andy, you've got a great structure for that just based on the conversations we have. Andy can tell you, okay, what do you have to pick up for us? Is it a bedroom? Is it a washing machine? Is it construction debris? And they can quickly and easily say, okay, that's going to be about a half of a ton or a quarter ton, whatever the measure is. And that's going to cost you X amount of dollars. That's what people want on the calls, right? And so kind of stepping back and saying, how can I systematize this easily so that somebody else can very quickly get to the heart of what I need them to do, book that appointment if that's what you want them to do, and then extrapolate yourself from it is what you want to be doing now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you answered it in a way that it absolutely makes sense to me. And that's where a lot of guys are getting hung up, right? I go on the Facebook pages and it's like, well, how do you bid this job? It's like, it's $600. It's like, but why? Right. Mm-hmm. And so this is the challenge I want to tell everybody when you're first starting off. You got to build your business from day one as though you're not in the business. And everything that you think is this proprietary information cannot be proprietary. You have to work yourself out of every job you have in order to take on the next job. If you're the only one that knows how to drive the truck, you'll never stop driving the truck. If you're the only one that knows how to bill customers, you're never going to have somebody else doing invoices, right? When you're the only person that knows how to do something, it is not systematic, thorough, or repeatable. Because it's, well, this is what I think it is. And so, no, I love what you said there, Jackie, because before you can even get to the receptionist stage, you need to do I have a process, and what is it? I don't care what the process is, right? Like my dad's process works for him. His process is this. He goes to Piggly Wiggly. That's the grocery store nearby. He goes to Piggly Wiggly, or he goes to Pick and Save, depending on the day. He picks up fried chicken or donuts, depending on the time of day. He takes them over to the exact same door store, Lisbon Storm and Screen, which, if everybody knows in Milwaukee, is the #1 door store in Milwaukee. If you're going to get a door window, you go to Lisbon Storm, Screen, and Door. There's two brothers, Dan and Dave, third generation. They're all over the radio. Everybody knows Storm, Screen, and Door, Lisbon Storm, Screen, and Door. My dad goes there, drops off chicken or donuts, again, depending on the time of day, the grocery store he's nearby. He goes there and bullshits with the guys, right? He then leaves. At some point, his phone rings because the next person that walks in and says, hey, I need a door put in my house, they'll say, cool, you can't buy a door from us unless one of our installers measures it first. They call Dan, right? And they never call Dan. They'll tell customers. So, Jackie, here's Dan's number. He needs, again, here's his branding. He is known as Dan the Doorman. Simple branding. Right?
I love that. Right.
His company name is right. His company name is Two Man Crew. He's a one-man operation. His branding means shit, right? And this is what happens. People call and they're like, "Hey Dan, I got your number from Lisbon." This is like 900% of the time, right? Yeah. His voicemail inbox is always full. He does not check text messages. So in the rare case he picks up the phone, right? He'll be like, "Oh yeah, all right, Jackie. Yeah, hold on a second." Puts his phone to his ear, pulls out his notepad, writes down your number. And in Wisconsin, we have two major zip codes, 414-262. So my dad, to this day, I love it. I do the same thing out of force of habit. My dad will write your phone number as 4 with a circle. If the camera, right? 4 with a circle if it's 414. Right, he doesn't have time for 414. 4 with a circle, and then he'll write down your first name and your address. And then he'll say, all right, I'll call you in the next couple of days when I'm in your neighborhood to measure your door. And people are like, okay, I guess, right? And they call back to Lisbon like, hey, is this guy for real? And they're like, oh yeah, he'll show up in the next couple of days. Like, right? And now he also has a contract with the city of Milwaukee where if they have a break-in and they need a service door put in today, they call him, they just give him an address and they'll just be like, and he'll go stop at the address, look at the door, stop the closest hardware store, go pick up a security door, show up 20 minutes later, slap it on in like a half hour. Right.
Nice.
He's been in business for 30 fucking years.
Yeah, but that's a system.
That's a system. That is the system. It goes from donuts to notepad
to chicken.
And he's 68 years old this year.
Right.
And last year we were talking about he made more money last year than he's ever made top line revenue because he's like, I do doors. That's all I do. I don't do windows. I'm not doing any additions. I'm not doing. So like the last couple of years, he's slowly gone to only doors, right? Yeah. And he makes more money than ever. And that's his system. So when I talk about the system, I got spreadsheets and flow charts and Jobber sponsors the podcast and like all this shit. And yet my dad's notebook has kept him in business for 30 years.
I think
he can explain that process. Like right now, you say, hey, Jackie, what's your process? Cool. Write down their name, their address, and tell them I'll call them in 3 days. Done. That's their process. And it works.
We would do great with that. And to your point, though, like the system or the process does not have to be super sophisticated. In fact, the simpler the system is, the better the chance that your team and your crew are going to get it 100% right every single time. And they're going to be able to execute on that with precision. And so I don't think people need to like worry about, oh gosh, are they going to think I'm hokey because I'm sitting in my truck writing this down? We're not. I promise you that. Like my onboarding team is going to be like, that works. Here's how we'll modify it. As long as it's something. You know, I just attended a speech. I think I told you about this last week, a Vistage group speak. And there was a Navy fighter pilot there. And he was speaking on a book called Debrief to Win. And he was talking about how the military executes with such precision, which I know, Andy, you know a lot about. But this was my first sort of foray into that. And two of the things that he said really struck with me. Like, first is that there's this notion of commander's intent. And this
Yep.
applies to business, right? The military wants to make sure that everybody knows the commander's intent. What is the objective? What is the goal? Like, what is the intent of the commander in this operation? And then they can work on decentralized execution. And this is how you scale to thousands of soldiers in the field, knowing exactly what to do in a very volatile, chaotic environment. And it was so resonant to me because I think I don't have thousands of people in a field, but I do have 220, 230 people working for me at any given time. And I have to be able to scale and move these processes out to them. And that is really what we're trying to do. And really, whether you have 1 person or 10 people, what you want to focus on is what is the intent here that I'm trying to get across? What is my objective on the phone call? And how can I decentralize that so they can make good decisions and I can step back and start working on the business? So I just ordered that book, by the way. I hope it's a good one. I'm not pitching for it. I don't know the author. But I like it.
That's one of the things that makes the American military far superior than any other military in the world is the fact from day one, going back to 1776 in the Blue Book, and I love history and military and all that stuff, right? It is that notion of the commander's intent. It's one of the reasons why the Russians struggle so much is because they lack NCOs, non-commissioned officers, right? They have the officers, right? Your captain, your lieutenants, and your captains, and your generals, and all the other, right? And then they have frontline soldiers. And the challenge is the frontline soldiers are always waiting to hear what the lieutenants or the captains and the generals give them, and it's all this centralized command, right? And now that lag of time, these people are making decisions with the wrong information, right? Or dated information, or they're making decisions by the time they make the decision and get down, the people they're telling who do what might be dead already, right? Or the information has changed. So yes, commander's intent. So with junk removal, for example, it's very simple things, right? You can tell your people, hey, our goal is to get these jobs done today. Our goal is to get it done in this amount of hours. Right, you can even break it down. Like I know Big Blue, 800 guy junk, they run on revenue per hour. Hey guys, when your revenue per hour exceeds this number, you get a bonus, right? And that KPI is tied directly to the financial goals of the organization. So now they know, right, the guys in the trucks, hey, are we running ahead, over, or behind schedule? It's that scorecard is going to be that simple, right? It is either red or it's green. Ain't no color in between.
Yeah.
Right, there's a fuck. Hold on, I'm gonna write that one down. That's gonna be my next book. I'm gonna seriously. I'm gonna text that to so I'm writing my next book. Phrases
I've
matter.
Seen revenue per employee as a metric, as a KPI.
So we use that. Yeah, so that's what we do. So we break it down into that part. I'm gonna here. This is how I write my book. I say something fucking dope. I send it to my co-author, and then he starts compiling these things. And we sit down once a week and say, all right, where does this fit in the book? Hold on. It's either red or green. Period. There's nothing in between. Let's fucking go. All right, so there we go. I can do a podcast and write a book at the same time because I'm aligned. We're dialed in here. All right. Speaking of alignment, it's been a very efficient hour. We've covered a lot of ground. I had one question I had in the hopper. Is receptionist still the proper nomenclature? Because I feel like secretary, receptionist. It's 2024. Pronouns and PC people. Right? Are we still calling receptionist? Is that the proper nomenclature?
Yeah, people are still okay with receptionist. Secretary is gone. Nobody uses that term anymore.
Okay, so great, because the person in charge of me is my executive assistant.
Yes.
Right, which is to call her an assistant is I didn't know like that's like the office, right? The what is it? The assistant to the regional manager or the assistant regional manager? Like which one? Like which has more authority?
Right. Yeah. It's that executive part that really elevates it, though.
Exactly.
She is fantastic.
She's the co-CEO. That's what I'm gonna call her from now on. There we go. I'm writing this down. Co-CEO. Actually, my daughter says that. I got a 10-year-old daughter, and I'll tell this story, and then we'll get to the big finish. So a couple of years ago, for like 4 years ago, actually it was post-COVID. I remember because I brought my daughter with me to work all summer. That basically 2020. Yeah. It's like, hey, it's the safest place we can be. Anyways, and I had a videography company at the time called Antidote Media Group, and we shot content for businesses. And one day, Penny was in here. She came to my office, and we're talking, and she had her own office. And one day, she's like, "So who's the boss here?" So she'd have been 6 at the time. And I'm like, "What do you mean, who's the boss?" She's like, "Well, like who's in charge?" And it never dawned on me at 6 years old that she didn't know that I was the owner of the company because she had come to work with me, but like not whatever. So I'm like, "Well, I'm the boss. Like I'm in charge. Yep, that's what's happening." She goes, "Are you sure?" I go, "Yeah, pretty sure I'm in charge." She goes, "I'm gonna go ask Tessa." So Tessa was this woman that worked for me at the time, And so she went over to Tessa's office, and my daughter adored Tessa. She had blonde hair. They just two peas in a pod, you know? And then she goes, Miss Tessa, who's in charge? Who's the boss? And she's like, well, Andy, your dad. She goes, he's the boss. And Tessa's like, yep. So she's like, so you have to do what he says. And she goes, that's, yep, kind of how I get paid. And she goes, well, I'm his daughter, so I'm the co-boss. So then you have to do what I have to say. And she goes, that's not how it works. And then Penny came, and then my daughter Penny came back in, and she goes, Dad, I'm the co-boss. And Tessa said she doesn't have to do what I say. I go, yeah, no, you're not. You're not the co-boss. Like, that's not a title. And she's 6 years old. I showed her an org chart. I go, there's not a co-boss on the org chart. And of course, it's like way. Anyway, so I've always taught my daughter business, and I've also always talked to my daughter at an adult level. So when I got back home, I was in Gitmo. I was in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for a year. So she was 5 months old when I left, like 18 months old when I got back home. And so I spent a whole year in Gitmo talking to adults, and like, these are real adults, like adults, not the greatest adults in this world. And because I worked in the facilities, and I remember I got back home and I was like, I'd sit there and talk to her. I'm like, man, we're having a disconnect. Like, I'm talking to you like an adult, and you're not tracking, right? And I always tell her, I was like, I do not negotiate with terrorists. Of course, everything's why.
Right. Yeah. We have said that to our kids too. We do not negotiate with terrorists, but it means more coming from you, given that you've actually been there.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines, especially when I first started in business, when I would get twitchy with people, I'd say, okay, let's reset her. I'm a master resiliency trainer. I spent a year in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, working with the gentleman that lived down there, and I have refined my interpersonal communication skills. So we're having a disconnect, and it's not on my side of the table. So let's talk about how you're receiving information. And generally, this was conversations I was having with vendors, and I'm very particular. The flow of money determines who's in charge. Because when I stop paying you, then you can stop listening to me. And then I stop paying you, and I go find someone else to pay. And I'm good with that. You're probably not.
Yeah.
We had a lot of what we call them in the military. This is something else the civilian world doesn't have, and it's one thing the military has that is wonderful. It's called very meaningful one-way conversations.
Those must be nice.
It depends on which way.
Which side you're on.
If you're sending or you're receiving, and having been in the military, I have received some very meaningful one-way conversations, and I've had some very meaningful one-way conversations. And I knife hand, right? The knife hand is the action here. There you go. See, I put it in front of my face, and that focuses, right? The knife hand is the action that goes with a very meaningful one-way conversation.
Andy, there we go. My HR director, she says, feedback is a gift.
Feedback. I'm giving you this.
Exactly.
HR. We also tell people you have not been successful in your employment here, so we're giving you an opportunity to find success in other places of employment. And then they look at you like, well, no, you are free to leave now. We will stop paying you. You clearly do not want to be here. You don't want to follow. So we're not gonna make this weird. Which I guess is probably making it weird by saying that. I also just kicked a cord. Nothing unplugged. That's pretty good of me. All right, let's get to the big finish. What has been your top takeaway from today's conversation that went all over the place?
Me?
Yeah, you. Yeah. No, your top takeaway. Yeah.
Oh, I love how you just get right to the point. And the idea here is get on these calls and perform an action. And I wish all of our customers had that same objective. But I think personally, my takeaway is I'm going to try to push for that a little bit more with our customers. Like, hey, get an action. Don't just let us take a message for you, which we can do, but like get an action on the call, book an appointment, do something, because you're going to get more value out of it. So I'm going to push that a lot harder than I've been.
No, I like that. And also it changes that nomenclature, right? I'll say this because this didn't tee it up until you said that. And now it all makes sense. It's like, receptionists receive information and take notes, right? That's like my idea of a receptionist, right? It's like Pam from The Office. Second Office reference today, no big deal. And yet that person, the gatekeeper, that first point of contact is the most significant person. I talk about all the time when people are like, I meet people at networking events and they're like, hey, when I call the office, should I ask for you? I go, if you do, it'll slow the process because I'm not there and I'm not in charge. And they're like laughing at me cheeky. I'm like, no, I'm not in charge. I pay someone in operations to be in charge. And right now, if I call Mike, he'd be like, hey, Mike, I need you to put this job on the schedule. He'd be like, no, we have other customers already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I can pull the trump card, and yet I don't because he's in charge. And so
right.
my thing is, and again, receptionist, fine, right? I'm all about words. However, when you shift that mindset from receptionist to something different, whatever that is, and customer service sounds fucking cliche and stupid.
Right. Yeah.
There's a better way of doing it where it's like, no, that's the most important person because that person can tell the business owner what the priorities are. So that word matters, and also that first second when they make that decision, you spend all this money in marketing and sales. When they make the decision to click on your name, your number, dial it, right? It behooves you to make sure that there's no more friction points from that point until the point that they hand you money.
Yeah.
And when your phone goes to voicemail, you're already losing the game.
You're losing. Exactly.
All right. Anything else for the good of the group? Are we good? We cross all the T's, dotted the I's, got a warm and fuzzy.
I'm great. I thought this was a fun conversation. This was my very first podcast, Andy, and it was really
seriously fun. You're a trained theater actor with international experience and an MBA, and you've never done a podcast?
No, I've done plenty of webinars, which are similar, but a little bit.
That's bullshit. Webinars. Yeah, well, because a webinar has this notion and agenda. Yeah, there was no. And I told you the other day, because we had our call about business, and in full transparency to the audience, I tell people this is how it happens. You get on, whatever time you get on, 5-2. I get on about a minute or two before the show. I verify your last name, and I hit record. And then you had this like audio, but oh, wait, we're starting. Because I was like, here we are. You're like, oh, shit. And it's like, that's it, because
that's it. That's our prep.
This is how we do things. And when guys like Dynasty jump in, it's like, well, how do we make this part of the show? Yeah. And so I will thank all of our guests. Thank you, Jackie, for being on the show, and to our listeners that continue to support us week in and week out, and the people that jump in live. This is one of my favorite hours of the week. And in order to keep it going, we need you to either become a guest on the show or tell us who do you want to hear from, and I will reach out to them so we can continue to keep the Trash Talk Business Podcast going strong. Next week, we're going to have Jenna Jans. She is a woman that is all about men's health and how you can be the best you as an entrepreneur when you have all these outside factors, and how do you align your life. And after that, July 8th, Andy Barton returns for our Q3 update. Halfway through the year, Andy Barton is going to talk about how the year of Junk Removal has been thus far and what you need to do to win the last 6 months of the year. Coming up in the next couple of weeks on the Trash Talk Business Podcast. As always, I'm Andy Weins on behalf of Taylor, our producer, and our great guest, Jackie. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.